The moment humanity leaves the table is the moment everyone remembers why the table existed. Princess Lyra Vane heard those words only once, and at the time she dismissed them as dramatic nonsense. 3 months later, standing inside the Galactic Council chamber, she could not stop hearing them. The chamber was the largest diplomatic structure ever built. A circular hall nearly half a mile wide floated above the neutral world of Arkan Prime. Thousands of lights glowed beneath transparent floors. Massive holographic star maps rotated slowly overhead. Representatives from more than 300 civilizations filled the ascending rows surrounding the central platform. Normally, the room carried the steady hum of negotiations. Today, it carried something else. Anxiety. Nobody said it aloud. Nobody needed to. Every delegate kept looking toward the same place. An empty chair. It sat near the center of the council floor beneath the emblem of Earth. Dark blue upholstery. Silver frame. Completely vacant. Lyra watched a senior trade minister from the Halion systems glance toward it for perhaps the 20th time in an hour. Nearby, 2 military advisors whispered nervously. Across the chamber, several economic representatives reviewed reports with increasingly concerned expressions. Humanity had not declared war. Humanity had not issued threats. Humanity had not even released an official statement. They had simply failed to appear. For the first time in nearly 2 centuries, no human representative attended the emergency session. The absence felt impossible. Humanity attended everything. Border disputes, trade negotiations, infrastructure planning, resource agreements, cultural exchanges. If a problem affected more than one civilization, a human was usually somewhere nearby trying to solve it. That consistency had become so normal that most species stopped noticing it. Until now. The council speaker activated the central platform. Blue light spread across the chamber. "We will begin." His voice echoed through the enormous hall. Yet even as proceedings started, attention continued drifting toward the empty seat. Lyra understood why. Humanity was not the strongest species in the galaxy. Not even close. Several empires possessed larger fleets. Others controlled more territory. Some wielded technologies Earth still struggled to replicate. Humans were known for diplomacy, cooperation, patience, traits respected but rarely feared, which was exactly why the current situation felt wrong. Over the past year, tensions between major powers had steadily increased. Trade demands grew more aggressive. Cooperative agreements became harder to maintain. Several governments ignored recommendations coming from Earth. Human diplomats responded with their usual calm persistence. More meetings, more proposals, more compromises. Most leaders assumed the pattern would continue forever. Then something changed. 3 weeks earlier, human ambassador Ethan Carter attended what many believed would be another routine summit. According to reports, he listened quietly for nearly 6 hours. He reviewed every proposal, every demand, every dismissal. Then he stood, thanked everyone for their time, and left. No dramatic speech, no anger, no threats, just a polite departure. Since then, humanity had become strangely silent. Lyra studied the empty chair again. Sunlight from Arkan Prime's twin stars filtered through the chamber's ceiling and illuminated the silver Earth emblem. Dust particles drifted through the beam like tiny stars. The sight felt unsettling. Around her, conversations continued. Economic concerns, political disagreements, resource forecasts. Yet beneath every discussion lurked the same unspoken question. Why had humanity stopped talking? Suddenly, a notification appeared across the chamber's primary display. Multiple delegates received it simultaneously. Murmurs spread immediately. Lyra opened the message and felt her stomach tighten. Another major interstellar logistics network had suspended operations. The network happened to be managed primarily by human coordinators. It was the 4th disruption reported that week. No crisis yet, but enough to attract attention. Enough to create concern. Across the council chamber, hundreds of eyes slowly returned to the empty chair. And for the first time in her life, Princess Lyra Vane realized the galaxy was not worried about what humanity might do. The galaxy was worried about what humanity might stop doing. For most of her life, Princess Lyra Vane believed humanity's greatest weakness was also its defining trait. Humans always tried to cooperate. They negotiated when others threatened. They compromised when others demanded. They searched for common ground long after most species would have walked away. In the Valari Alliance, many considered those habits admirable. Very few considered them dangerous. Standing inside her private observation suite high above Arkan Prime, Lyra stared through a wall of transparent crystal as transport vessels crossed the night sky. The Galactic Council session had ended hours earlier, but the unease remained. Reports continued arriving from every major sector. Delays, disruptions, confusion, nothing catastrophic. Not yet. Yet the pattern was impossible to ignore. Humanity was becoming absent. The thought felt strange. For nearly 200 years, humans seemed to be everywhere. They managed shipping corridors, coordinated emergency logistics, maintained communication standards, resolved trade disputes, organized joint infrastructure projects. Most civilizations viewed those contributions the same way they viewed gravity. Constant, reliable, easy to forget until something changed. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. An incoming transmission appeared above her desk. The caller was an elderly Valari senator named Corvin Hale, one of the few surviving diplomats who remembered first contact with Earth generations earlier. His silver robes shimmered beneath the holographic display. "You attended the council?" he asked. Lyra nodded. The atmosphere was unusual. The old senator laughed quietly. "That is a diplomatic way to describe panic." Lyra crossed her arms. "Everyone is overreacting." Corvin studied her for several seconds. "Do you believe that?" She opened her mouth to answer and discovered she was not certain. The senator smiled knowingly. "When I was young, many species underestimated humans. Because they lacked military strength?" Corvin laughed again. "No, because they lacked arrogance." He leaned closer. "Most civilizations announce their power. Humans usually demonstrate it by solving problems." The statement lingered after the transmission ended. Later that evening, Lyra reviewed historical records concerning Earth's rise into galactic affairs. The story surprised her. Humanity had not conquered territory. They had not dominated trade routes. They had not forced their influence upon anyone. Instead, they became essential by volunteering for tasks nobody else wanted. Difficult negotiations, complex logistics, infrastructure coordination across distant systems. Hundreds of small responsibilities that gradually connected thousands of worlds. The deeper she searched, the more often the same pattern appeared. When a crisis emerged, humans arrived. When cooperation collapsed, humans rebuilt it. When communication failed, humans restored it. Their influence spread quietly, almost invisibly, which explained why so many species failed to notice it. The following morning, another emergency notification reached the council networks. Several major freight exchanges reported growing inefficiencies. Delivery schedules once considered routine now required constant revision. Trade officials struggled to explain why. Lyra studied the data carefully. Then she noticed something interesting. Most affected routes shared one characteristic. Human coordination teams had recently stepped aside. Not permanently, not dramatically. They simply stopped volunteering additional support. The consequences appeared immediately. Small delays became larger delays. Minor misunderstandings multiplied. Systems that once functioned smoothly required far more effort to maintain. Lyra leaned back in silence. Outside her window, dawn illuminated the horizon with shades of gold and blue. The realization unsettled her. Humanity had not changed the galaxy through force. Humanity had changed it through participation. For generations, they helped hold countless systems together so consistently that everyone assumed stability happened naturally. As sunlight spread across the skyline of Arkan Prime, Lyra remembered the empty chair inside the council chamber. For the first time, she understood why it frightened so many leaders. The galaxy never feared what humans could destroy. The galaxy feared discovering how much it depended on what humans quietly built. 3 days later, Princess Lyra Vane finally met the man everyone was talking about. Not in a council chamber. Not during a diplomatic ceremony. Not beneath the gaze of cameras and officials. She found him alone. The discovery felt almost disappointing. For weeks, the name Ethan Carter had circulated through every major discussion across the galaxy. Economic advisors quoted him. Trade ministers referenced his proposals. Governors complained about his silence. Entire sectors seemed obsessed with understanding what humanity intended to do next. Yet when Lyra arrived at the temporary Earth delegation headquarters on Arkan Prime, The human ambassador looked remarkably ordinary. The building itself reflected the same philosophy. No towering monuments. No displays of prestige. No extravagant architecture. The structure occupied a modest section of the diplomatic district overlooking a public park. Sunlight reflected from nearby fountains. Citizens from dozens of species walked peaceful pathways lined with flowering trees. Everything felt calm, deliberately calm. Ethan stood near a window reviewing reports on a transparent display. Dark suit. Simple posture. No visible security presence. No signs of urgency. If Lyra had passed him on a public street, she might never have guessed he was currently the most discussed human in the galaxy. He looked up as she entered. Princess Lyra. His voice carried the same calm confidence visible in every public recording she had studied. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Thank you for coming. He gestured toward a seating area overlooking the park. Can I offer you tea? The question caught her off guard. Entire governments were scrambling to understand humanity's actions, and the ambassador was offering tea. No thank you, she replied. Ethan nodded and sat down. Outside the window, children from several species played near the fountains. Air transports crossed the distant skyline. Life continued as though nothing unusual was happening. Lyra decided to abandon diplomacy. The galaxy is worried. I know. People want answers. I know that too. The simplicity irritated her. Then why is humanity refusing to provide them? Ethan looked toward the park. For several seconds, he remained silent. Humanity spent decades providing answers. That is not the same thing. No, he agreed. It is not. Lyra studied him carefully. There was no anger in his expression. No resentment. No hostility. If anything, he looked tired. Not physically tired. Emotionally tired. Like someone who had repeated the same conversation too many times. The Council believes Earth is making a mistake, she said. Ethan smiled faintly. The Council has believed that before. And if they are right, then humanity will accept the consequences. The answer felt impossible. Most governments defended every decision aggressively. Most leaders feared appearing uncertain. Ethan spoke as though being wrong was simply part of responsibility. The conversation paused. Outside, sunlight moved across the park pathways. A maintenance drone trimmed decorative plants near a fountain. Ordinary details. Quiet details. Then Ethan spoke again. Do you know what surprised humans most when we joined the galactic community? Lyra shook her head. Everyone assumed cooperation happened automatically. His gaze remained fixed on the park. Humans learned something different on Earth. Cooperation requires maintenance. Constant effort. Someone has to organize meetings. Resolve disagreements. Coordinate logistics. Build trust. He turned toward her. For a long time, humanity volunteered. Lyra felt a sudden chill despite the warm afternoon light. And now, Ethan looked back toward the window. Now humanity is waiting to see whether anyone noticed. Silence settled between them. Beyond the glass, the city remained peaceful. The fountains continued flowing. The children continued laughing. Yet for the first time, Lyra sensed the true weight of what was happening. Humanity was not threatening the galaxy. Humanity was asking a question. And the longer she considered it, the more she feared nobody had a good answer. The departure happened 4 days later. Not with an announcement. Not with a warning. Not with anger. Humanity simply stood up and walked away. Princess Lyra Vane was present when it happened. The emergency summit occupied the upper levels of the Galactic Council complex. Representatives from every major civilization gathered around a circular table overlooking Arkan Prime's Eastern Ocean. Morning sunlight reflected across the water and filled the chamber with shifting bands of gold and blue. The setting looked peaceful. The atmosphere did not. For nearly 7 hours, delegates debated the same issues they had debated for months. Resource access, trade obligations, infrastructure funding, shared responsibilities. The arguments followed familiar patterns. Demands increased. Compromises shrank. Every discussion seemed designed to protect individual interests rather than collective stability. Lyra watched carefully. More importantly, she watched Ethan Carter. The human ambassador spent most of the session listening. He reviewed projections. He asked questions. He clarified assumptions. Several times he proposed practical solutions. Several times those solutions were ignored. Not rejected. Ignored. The distinction mattered. By mid-afternoon, fatigue settled across the room. Advisors exchanged frustrated glances. Economic forecasts continued worsening. New reports described delays spreading through transportation networks and communication systems. Problems once resolved quietly by human coordination teams now remained unresolved. Yet even then, many delegates treated the situation as temporary. Humanity would eventually step forward and fix everything. Humanity always did. Then the final proposal appeared on the central display. Lyra read it twice. The recommendation required Earth to assume additional logistical responsibilities while receiving fewer decision-making rights in return. Several delegates immediately supported the measure. Others remained silent. Ethan studied the document for nearly 30 seconds. The room waited. Finally, he stood. No dramatic gesture. No visible frustration. Just a quiet movement that somehow drew every eye in the chamber. He closed his tablet and looked around the table. Sunlight reflected across the polished surface between the representatives. Outside the windows, waves rolled gently toward the shoreline thousands of feet below. Humanity has spent 187 years helping maintain these systems, Ethan said. His voice remained calm. We did so because cooperation benefits everyone. Silence filled the room. We have raised concerns repeatedly. We have offered alternatives repeatedly. We have volunteered support repeatedly. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. Ethan nodded once, almost to himself. We have done everything we can. Then he gathered his documents. No threats. No accusations. No emotional speech. Just a simple conclusion. Good luck. Lyra felt a strange sensation as he walked toward the exit. Not relief. Not surprise. Something closer to disbelief. The human ambassador reached the doorway. For a brief moment he paused. Sunlight illuminated the corridor beyond. Then he left. The door closed quietly behind him. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The chamber remained frozen for several seconds. Then discussions resumed. At first, several representatives dismissed the moment entirely. Others claimed Earth would return within days. A few even appeared pleased. Yet Lyra noticed something different. Beneath the confident statements, uncertainty had appeared. By evening, news spread across every major network in known space. Humanity had withdrawn from dozens of voluntary coordination agreements. Human advisory teams returned home. Human mediation offices closed. Human infrastructure specialists stepped aside. Not permanently. Not aggressively. They simply stopped carrying responsibilities that belonged to everyone else. As darkness settled across Arkan Prime, Lyra stood alone beside a window overlooking the ocean. Far below, city lights reflected across the water like scattered stars. Behind her, council officials scrambled to organize emergency replacements. For the first time, they were discovering how much work humanity had quietly performed. And for the first time, Princess Lyra Vane began to understand why the empty chair frightened the galaxy more than any threat ever could. The consequences arrived quietly. That was what made them terrifying. Princess Lyra Vane expected dramatic headlines after humanity stepped away from its voluntary responsibilities. She expected emergency declarations, public outrage, perhaps even accusations. Instead, the galaxy experienced something far worse. Silence. Systems that had always worked simply stopped working as well as they once had. Nothing collapsed overnight. Nothing exploded into chaos. Efficiency merely began disappearing one small piece at a time. A week after the summit, Lyra stood inside the Strategic Coordination Center on Arkan Prime. The facility operated 24 hours a day and monitored transportation, communication, and commercial activity across hundreds of systems. Normally, the vast chamber glowed with orderly streams of information flowing across enormous holographic displays. Today, the displays looked different. Yellow warning indicators appeared everywhere. Minor delays, scheduling conflicts, routing inefficiencies. Separately, each issue seemed insignificant. Together, they painted an unsettling picture. How bad is it? Lyra asked. A logistics director rubbed his eyes before answering. Not bad enough to trigger emergency protocols. He pointed toward a cluster of projections suspended above the central table. That is the problem. The charts showed shipping delays averaging only a few hours. Communication approvals taking slightly longer than normal. Infrastructure maintenance requests accumulating faster than they were processed. Small numbers. Small disruptions. Yet every graph moved in the wrong direction. Lyra studied the projections carefully. Why can nobody solve this? The director laughed without humor. Everyone is solving it. The problem is that humans used to solve it before it became visible. The answer followed her throughout the day. Everywhere she looked, she found examples. Trade negotiations that once required 2 meetings now required 6. Resource exchanges faced misunderstandings that previously disappeared through quiet mediation. Transportation routes demanded constant manual adjustments. None of these tasks were impossible. They simply required effort. Effort humanity had provided so consistently that everyone forgot it existed. That evening, another council session convened. The atmosphere felt noticeably different from previous gatherings. Confidence had vanished. Delegates who once dismissed human concerns now reviewed reports with visible concern. Several representatives demanded explanations from Earth's absent delegation. Others proposed temporary solutions. None addressed the deeper issue. Humanity had not removed a single critical system. Humanity had removed thousands of invisible contributions. During a recess, Lyra found herself speaking with a transportation minister from the Helion systems. The elderly official looked exhausted. "We lost 3 days this week," he admitted. 3 days. Coordination delays. He sighed heavily. Nothing serious. Just small problems. Hundreds of them. His expression darkened. Humans used to call us before we even noticed. The statement lingered in Lyra's mind. Later that night, she reviewed archived records from previous decades. The deeper she searched, the more astonishing the pattern became. Human volunteers, human advisors, human coordinators, human mediators. The names appeared everywhere. Not in positions of authority, not in positions of command, in positions of responsibility. They carried burdens nobody requested, but everyone benefited from. As midnight approached, Lyra stepped onto an observation balcony overlooking the lights of Arkan Prime. Rain drifted gently through the darkness. The city below glowed beneath thousands of illuminated towers. Air traffic moved more slowly than usual. Even here, small delays were becoming visible. She remembered her conversation with Ethan Carter. Humanity was waiting to see whether anyone noticed. The answer was becoming obvious. The galaxy had noticed. What frightened Lyra was the realization that humanity still had not retaliated. They had not imposed sanctions. They had not threatened anyone. They had not even raised their voices. They simply stopped carrying responsibilities that others took for granted. And somehow that quiet decision was teaching the galaxy a lesson no display of force ever could. For generations, civilizations believed humanity needed the galactic community. Now, standing beneath the rain-soaked lights of Arkan Prime, Princess Lyra Vane was beginning to suspect the relationship had always been far more balanced than anyone realized. 2 weeks after humanity stepped back, Princess Lyra Vane discovered the truth. Not the truth about what humans were doing. The truth about what they had been doing all along. The realization arrived inside a forgotten archive buried beneath the administrative levels of the Galactic Council complex. The facility had existed for more than a century and contained operational records most officials never bothered to examine. Lyra entered searching for answers. She left questioning everything she thought she knew about the galaxy. The archive occupied a vast underground chamber illuminated by soft white light panels stretching across the ceiling. Endless rows of data vaults extended into the distance. Autonomous retrieval systems moved silently between shelves. The atmosphere felt more like a museum than a strategic facility. An archivist guided her toward historical infrastructure records. "You are not the first person asking these questions," the elderly official said quietly. "Lately, everyone is asking them." Lyra activated the first set of files. Thousands of reports appeared in floating displays around her. Transportation agreements, communication frameworks, resource coordination networks, emergency response systems. At first glance, the documents looked routine. Then she began noticing names. Human names, human departments, human advisory teams, human volunteers. The pattern repeated endlessly. Every major system seemed connected to human participation in some way. She opened another archive, then another, then 10 more. The results became impossible to ignore. Humanity was not merely helping the galaxy function. Humanity was connecting the galaxy together. Shipping routes relied upon coordination standards designed by Earth. Emergency logistics depended upon human-created communication protocols. Trade networks used frameworks originally proposed by human negotiators. Even routine administrative systems contained layers of human involvement dating back generations. Lyra felt a chill. The galaxy had spent decades assuming these structures existed naturally. In reality, someone had built them. Humanity had built them. An enormous holographic map materialized above the archive floor. Thousands of illuminated pathways connected hundreds of systems. Transportation corridors, communication links, trade routes, diplomatic channels. The entire galactic network resembled a living organism. Lyra selected a filtering command. Human contributions highlighted across the display. The map exploded with light. Entire regions illuminated simultaneously. Her breath caught. This cannot be right. The archivist looked unsurprised. It is. Why was nobody talking about this? Because humans never asked anyone to. The answer felt almost absurd. Most civilizations advertised every achievement, every victory, every contribution. Humanity appeared to have done the opposite. They built systems and quietly stepped aside. They solved problems and allowed others to receive attention. They connected worlds without demanding recognition. Suddenly, the events of recent weeks made sense. The galaxy was not struggling because humans launched an attack. The galaxy was struggling because invisible support structures were disappearing. Support structures nobody realized existed. Hours later, Lyra attended another emergency council session. The atmosphere had deteriorated further. Economic projections continued slipping. Transportation inefficiencies expanded. Diplomatic misunderstandings multiplied. Leaders demanded solutions. Yet something had changed. The conversation sounded different now. Less arrogant. More concerned. More honest. During one presentation, a logistics director displayed updated performance metrics. We can replace individual human teams, he explained. What we cannot replace quickly is the experience accumulated across nearly 2 centuries. The chamber fell silent. Everyone understood the implication. Humanity had not become valuable overnight. Humanity had become valuable through generations of service. That evening, Lyra stood alone outside the council complex. The twin suns of Arkan Prime descended toward the horizon. Their light reflected across glass towers and distant oceans. The city glowed with colors of amber and silver. For the first time, she truly understood Ethan Carter's question. Humanity was waiting to see whether anyone noticed. They had noticed now. The entire galaxy had noticed. What frightened Lyra most was not humanity's influence. It was humanity's restraint. A civilization capable of quietly supporting hundreds of worlds had chosen cooperation for nearly 2 centuries. They could have demanded power. They could have demanded control. Instead, they offered service. And now that service was gone. As the suns disappeared beyond the horizon, Princess Lyra Vane finally understood why so many leaders were afraid. The galaxy had spent generations believing humans were merely participants in the system. The truth was far more unsettling. Humans had become part of the foundation. The breaking point arrived not because conditions became disastrous, but because confidence began disappearing. Princess Lyra Vane noticed it first in the faces of leaders who had once sounded certain. Council representatives who previously dismissed human concerns now spoke in cautious tones. Economic ministers requested emergency consultations. Trade coalitions postponed ambitious projects. Transportation authorities lowered growth forecasts for the first time in decades. The galaxy remained functional. The galaxy remained prosperous. Yet beneath every report lurked the same uncomfortable reality. Nobody knew how much worse the situation could become. The uncertainty spread faster than any disruption. One morning, Lyra entered the council chamber and immediately sensed the difference. Conversations stopped when new reports appeared. Delegates studied projections with unusual focus. Advisors whispered less and listened more. Even the enormous chamber itself felt quieter, as if the entire institution had become aware of its own fragility. A senior representative from the Orion Trade Collective activated a presentation above the central floor. Thousands of data points illuminated the air. Resource exchanges continued slowing. Interstellar scheduling conflicts continued increasing. Administrative backlogs expanded across dozens of sectors. None of the numbers looked catastrophic. Together, however, they revealed a troubling pattern. Every week required more effort to achieve results that once happened effortlessly. We are spending increasing resources maintaining existing systems, the representative admitted. At this rate, long-term expansion projects will become difficult to sustain. Difficult. The word echoed through the room. For generations, progress had seemed inevitable. Now even the most powerful civilizations were discussing limitations. Later that afternoon, Lyra met with several alliance governors attending a closed strategy session. The meeting quickly transformed into something unexpected. Instead of debating policies, the governors debated assumptions. Assumptions they had held for decades. One governor admitted his administration depended heavily upon human-created logistics software. Another acknowledged that human mediation teams previously resolved regional disagreements before they reached government level. A third revealed that several trade agreements existed only because human negotiators had patiently maintained trust between rival systems for years. One by one, leaders began recognizing contributions they had never properly valued. The realization was uncomfortable. Outside the conference center, rain drifted across the city skyline. Air traffic moved through layers of silver clouds. Lyra watched the weather through a towering window while listening to the discussion behind her. Nobody was talking about punishment anymore. Nobody was talking about forcing humanity back into cooperation. Those conversations had disappeared. Now leaders asked a different question. How had they failed to notice humanity's role for so long? That evening, a confidential report circulated among senior officials. Lyra reviewed it alone in her residence overlooking the ocean. The findings were straightforward. Every major coalition attempting to replace human support networks encountered the same obstacle. Technical systems could be replicated. Infrastructure could be rebuilt. Personnel could be hired. What could not be reproduced quickly was trust. Human teams spent generations building relationships between worlds that often disagreed with one another. They remembered histories, customs, preferences, and compromises. They knew who would cooperate, who required reassurance, and who needed patience. Those invisible connections had become one of the galaxy's most valuable resources. And now they were missing. Near midnight, Lyra stepped onto her balcony. The rain had stopped. Reflections shimmered across the dark ocean beyond the city. Thousands of lights glowed along the shoreline. Beautiful, calm. Yet she understood something many leaders were only beginning to realize. Humanity's response had never been about disruption. It was about absence. By stepping aside, humans forced the galaxy to confront a truth it had avoided for generations. Strength was not always measured by what a civilization could impose. Sometimes strength was measured by what happened when that civilization quietly stopped helping. As cool night air drifted across the balcony, Princess Lyra Vane looked toward the distant horizon and understood that the galaxy's greatest fear was no longer uncertainty about human intentions. The real fear was discovering just how much of the future depended on earning humanity's trust again. The answer arrived on a quiet afternoon beneath a sky filled with silver clouds. Princess Lyra Vane sat across from Ethan Carter for the second time. The meeting took place far from the council chambers and emergency conferences that now dominated galactic politics. Ethan had chosen a small public garden overlooking the western shoreline of Arkan Prime. Children from several species wandered along stone pathways. Wind moved gently through rows of flowering trees. Ocean waves rolled against distant cliffs. The setting felt strangely ordinary considering the weight of the conversation. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. They watched the horizon where sunlight occasionally pierced gaps in the clouds. Finally, Lyra broke the silence. The council wants to know what humanity is trying to achieve. Ethan smiled faintly. Humanity is not trying to achieve anything. Nobody believes that. That does not make it untrue. Lyra leaned forward. Entire sectors are reorganizing their economies. Governments are rewriting agreements. Leaders are holding emergency sessions every day. Ethan nodded. I know. Then why step away? For a moment, he seemed to search for the right words. Not because the answer was difficult. Because he wanted it understood correctly. Tell me something, princess. What happens when a bridge disappears? Lyra frowned. People notice. Immediately, Ethan picked up a small stone from the garden path and turned it between his fingers. But what happens when the people maintaining the bridge quietly stop showing up? The question lingered. Nothing at first, she admitted. Exactly. He placed the stone back on the ground. Humanity never wanted power. We wanted cooperation. The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and rain. Nearby, a maintenance drone trimmed decorative shrubs with precise movements. Everything around them felt peaceful. Ethan continued. Most civilizations think strength means control. Bigger fleets, larger economies, more influence. He shook his head. Humans learned something different on Earth. Lyra listened carefully. What did they learn? Ethan looked toward the distant water. The strongest systems are the ones people choose to support. The answer surprised her. She expected discussions of strategy, infrastructure, politics. Instead, he spoke about trust. For nearly 2 centuries, he said, humans invested in relationships. We helped because helping improved everyone's future, not because we expected rewards. His voice remained calm. No bitterness, no anger, just simple honesty. Eventually, people stopped seeing the effort. They only saw the results. Lyra understood immediately. The transportation networks, the diplomatic agreements, the communication standards, the countless invisible systems she had spent weeks studying. Most leaders treated them as permanent features of civilization. They forgot someone maintained them. Someone cared about them. Ethan turned toward her. The galaxy thinks humanity retaliated. Did you not? A small smile appeared. No. The answer startled her. Then what happened? He looked around the garden. Families talking. Children laughing. Different species sharing the same space without concern. Humanity stopped protecting people from the consequences of ignoring cooperation. The simplicity of the statement struck harder than any accusation. For years, humans solved problems before they became visible. For years, they absorbed responsibilities nobody else wanted. For years, they repaired cracks before anyone noticed they existed. Then they stopped. Not out of revenge. Out of necessity. The realization settled slowly inside her. Humanity's true strength had never been hidden technology. It had never been military power. It had never been economic leverage. Humanity's greatest strength was its willingness to invest effort into a future everyone shared. As afternoon sunlight finally broke through the clouds, golden light spread across the garden pathways. Ethan watched it quietly. People keep asking why the galaxy is struggling now, he said. The answer is simple. Lyra already knew what he was going to say. The galaxy was never being held together by fear. Ethan nodded. It was being held together by cooperation. And for the first time since this crisis began, Princess Lyra Vane understood exactly why the galaxy had become afraid. The empty chair was occupied again 42 days later. Princess Lyra Vane arrived early that morning. She wanted to see the moment with her own eyes. The Galactic Council chamber looked exactly as it had on the day humanity disappeared. The same transparent floors, the same rotating star maps, the same rows of representatives surrounding the central platform. Yet everything felt different. The room carried a humility that had not existed before. Conversations were quieter. Delegates listened more carefully. Advisors reviewed reports with greater respect for details once considered insignificant. The galaxy had learned something during those 42 days. Stability was not automatic. Cooperation was not free. And trust was not an unlimited resource. As council members entered the chamber, eyes repeatedly drifted toward the familiar seat beneath Earth's silver emblem. This time it was not empty. Ethan Carter sat there reviewing documents exactly as though nothing unusual had happened. No dramatic return. No celebration. No demand for recognition. Just a human ambassador preparing for another day of work. The sight alone seemed to relax the room. Lyra noticed it immediately. Shoulders lowered. Conversations became easier. Even the atmosphere changed. Humanity had not restored a single system yet. Humanity had not signed a single agreement yet. Yet their presence already brought confidence. The session began shortly afterward. Representatives from multiple coalitions stood one by one to address the council. Some offered revised partnership proposals. Others acknowledged mistakes. Several requested renewed cooperation. None attempted to defend the assumptions that created the crisis. The shift felt extraordinary. Not because the galaxy had become weaker, because the galaxy had become wiser. During a recess, Lyra walked through a corridor overlooking Arkan Prime's central skyline. Morning sunlight reflected from thousands of glass towers. Air traffic moved smoothly through the bright blue sky. Activity throughout the city had gradually returned to normal during the previous week as new agreements formed and human coordination teams cautiously resumed selected responsibilities. Yet the most important change was not operational. It was philosophical. Leaders now understood what humanity had been trying to teach them. Ethan joined her near the window. Neither spoke immediately. Together they watched transports move between distant platforms suspended above the city. Finally, Lyra smiled. You could have demanded almost anything. Ethan laughed softly. That was never the goal. Most civilizations would have used this moment differently. That is probably true. Sunlight reflected in the glass beside them. The city below shimmered with life. Citizens from hundreds of worlds shared streets, markets, schools, and workplaces. A living example of cooperation. Ethan looked toward the horizon. Humanity did not want the galaxy to fear us. Lyra remembered the panic, the uncertainty, the weeks spent discovering how deeply human contributions touched everyday life. You succeeded anyway. Ethan shook his head. No. His voice remained calm. The galaxy was never afraid of humanity. She turned toward him. Then what was everyone afraid of? For a moment, he simply watched the city. Then he answered, losing something valuable after taking it for granted. The words settled gently between them. Below, sunlight danced across fountains and public gardens. Children from different species crossed a plaza together. Life moved forward. Simple, ordinary, precious. Months later, historians would debate the crisis. Economists would analyze it. Politicians would reference it. Yet Princess Lyra Vane knew the lesson was much simpler than any official report would admit. The galaxy spent generations believing humanity was powerful because of what humans could build. The truth was far more remarkable. Humanity became powerful because they kept choosing to build together. And in a universe obsessed with control, that choice turned out to be the rarest strength of all. As the council chamber filled once more with discussion and possibility, Lyra glanced toward the occupied chair and smiled. The galaxy had learned fear, but what it ultimately gained was respect. And that made all the difference.